Well, earnings season kicking off in earnest this morning. You got two big banks, Citigroup and JP Morgan, reporting latest profits in just a few hours. Tomorrow, we've got Bank of America, Wells Fargo. Let's talk about the banks and, of course, the record run of the markets. David Nelson, chief strategist of Belpointe Asset Management, is here. Obviously, we're going to be looking at these banks, but, you know, these stocks have been on such a run, in particular with regulatory burdens on them being lifted quietly by the Trump administration. Are you still bullish on banks?
It's certainly a big part of the Trump trade. And overall, I am. However, there is, like you said, a lot of good news priced into these names. Full disclosure, sold JP Morgan earlier this week. Estimates for the group have been coming down on the heels of a lot of things, including loan growth, possibly declining this last quarter. Trading revenues are likely to be soft. I think the real good news for this industry is that they're still only trading at around 14 times. And like you said, the rollback of regulatory overreach over the last 8 years, that's good news for these guys. But I'm looking for a better entry point. And
also the trading revenue, because that's really been something that's been under pressure with the group as a whole.
Yeah.
Because you have, and so and they're now looking for other revenue streams. And Morgan Stanley's been reaching out to try and get more into consumer banking. So there's some bright spots in there. It just depends on the business.
They're doing some very interesting things. As a matter of fact, Goldman Sachs, understanding that, fixed income is in a secular decline. Equity trading is not all that robust as well. They're actually trading Bitcoin at this point. So they're going to go all out to try to find ways to goose the revenue.
Goldman Sachs getting into the Bitcoin business. I never thought that would come out of my mouth.
Me either.
Let's talk about the Fed. We got the minutes yesterday, but obviously all the talk around the world is about the interest rate hike and the possibility of it for December. It seems like it's baked in, David. What do you say?
Yeah, the probability is pretty high, and they all but hinted at that in the minutes here. I think the big news for the Fed is the recognition in the minutes that perhaps inflation or the lack thereof is not just transitory. And I think what they didn't understand early on was that this change in the oil dynamic, the supply-demand metric, with OPEC all effectively dead at this point because of the new technology, fracking here in the United States, that touches everything. It touches the cost of driving to work, the electric grid, manufacturing. So that kind of keeps a lid on inflation. But, yeah, they're going to hike. How they unwind the balance sheet and how the market reacts to that over time, that's really the big news.
Yeah, I think the unwinding, I think investors seem pretty prepared for. But I think your point about the energy industry being the elephant in the room, that's key because, if that doesn't change, that means that their targets are going to have to be adjusted. And they seem to be slow to react. But anyway, let's talk about what's happening in Washington. In particular, you've got a lot of dialogue going on about NAFTA right now. That could be really interesting for businesses because there's discussions now that you actually change the way that NAFTA is negotiated. You make it basically a sunset clause. Explain what that means.
Yeah, that was the most interesting dynamic, and it's actually back in the news cycle again. The sunset clause, if you put that in, it would expire, say, in 5 years, and everybody'd have to come back to the table. It creates an air of uncertainty that I think the president and the administration actually wanted because, for example, if you're the CEO of Ford and you're thinking about building a factory in Mexico, if you're uncertain as to where NAFTA is likely to be 3, 4, 5 years from now, you just might not do that. I think that's what the president wants. However, the other side sees this, and they're going to push back pretty hard.
Yeah, well, making that deal, the art of the deal. And he said that on the campaign trail, that NAFTA needed to be renegotiated. Every 5 years, that's quite the negotiating.
I think what he wants to do, Cheryl, is negotiate with these countries one by one. And I think that's probably better for America.
Well, Trudeau was here. You're right. David Nelson, thank you very much, David. It's great to have you this morning.
Thanks for having me.